A fresh face transfers into a Korean high school, but instead of a polite greeting, Ryo Kangmin walks in and casually asks if anyone has a smoke on them. The teacher realizes on the spot that this kid is going to be a massive headache, while his new classmates just stare at him, completely stunned. Once class wraps up, Kangmin spots the school's resident bullies roughing up one of their fellow classmates. The gang notices him watching them, prompting them to ask why he's just standing there by himself. Kangmin plays dumb, telling them he just got back from living abroad and knows absolutely nothing about how Korean schools work. He claims to have zero friends, no local contacts, and absolutely no clue how normal students here behave. This clueless act makes him an instant target for the school's main gang of troublemakers. Their leader decides to test him, asking if he's familiar with a well-known street fighter from Daejeon. Just to blend in, Kangmin plays along and spins a lie, claiming he and this fighter used to grab drinks together. The bullies play along, acting convinced, and welcoming him into the fold while offering to be his first real buddies. After the final bell, a girl named Hyeon suddenly wraps herself around his arm, pressing herself right against him. She looks up at him and asks if he's heading straight back home. He tells her that's the plan, since he's already completely exhausted from his first day. She purrs that she can help him unwind, and our guy isn't about to say no to an offer like that, eagerly agreeing to go along. Later that evening, Hyeon leads Kangmin straight to a cheap motel room. She pretends to be totally into him, but it's all a trap. The rest of the gang bursts out of hiding with their phones recording. They laughingly reveal that they've already called up the legendary Daejeon fighter he claimed to be buddies with. Our guy was officially busted in broad daylight. Surrounding him, they mock his lies and announce that starting today, he's going to be their personal errand boy. Kangmin keeps up the bewildered act, letting them think they've successfully cornered a weak, defenseless transfer kid. One of the punks slaps him across the face, grabs his uniform, and rips his shirt open. But their laughter dies instantly. His body is a roadmap of brutal scars, ancient combat wounds, and a muscular build that no normal high schooler could ever have. Before stepping foot in Korea, he had spent brutal years training on a remote private island run by Batala, one of the most lethal assassination syndicates on Earth. He'd survived brutal underwater torture, live fire drills, and sadistic instructors who would put a bullet in you for being 60 seconds late. You see, Kangmin is anything but a helpless kid. He is Spade A top-tier contract killer deployed to Korea for one last high-stakes hit. By laying their hands on him, these punks had accidentally triggered his absolute personal protocol. Anyone who throws the first punch immediately gets classified as an active target. Kangmin simply raises his hand and unleashes a single, devastating slap that sends the guy spinning into another dimension before crashing to the floor. Even then, Kangmin preferred to let his opponents initiate the violence. He patiently stood his ground, waiting for them to give him the perfect excuse to end them. When one of the students swings a heavy fire extinguisher at his skull, Kangmin catches the heavy metal tank barehanded and crushes it like a soda can. He then grabs the attacker by his face and slams him headfirst deep into the mattress. What happened next wasn't even a confrontation. It was a brutal, one-sided educational course. Another thug is kicked so hard he crashes straight through the porcelain bathroom sink. Their absolute powerhouse, a former MMA prospect, charges in with supreme confidence, only to get launched through a wall, leaving his body bent like a pretzel. Now, you might be wondering how exactly we arrived at this chaotic situation. Let's take a quick step back to see how it all started. Earlier that afternoon, Kangmin was standing at a busy intersection in his high school uniform, feeling deeply overwhelmed by the state of his homeland. He recalled how, back in elementary school, he used to run down the street to fetch strong liquor and cigarettes for his father. But that warm, welcoming vibe he associated with Korea seemed gone, making him wonder if they traded genuine hospitality for rapid modernization. A decade had passed since his last visit, and stepping back onto Korean soil made him feel as though he had been dropped straight into a sci-fi future. Every corner was packed with high-end sports cars, and even regular pedestrians were draped in luxury brands as if it were nothing. He eventually walked over to a local park to find a giant duck statue he used to adore during his childhood. Amusingly, the duck seemed much larger now, making him wonder if even the statues grew alongside the nation's economy. Even with all the modern steel and concrete, he noted with relief that the cherry blossoms on the avenues remained completely unchanged. At that exact moment, a young boy dashes right past him toward his waiting mother and father. Having just played at the park, the kid loudly declares to his parents that he's craving duck soup. His father chuckles, anticipating this exact request, and assures the boy that a dinner reservation is already set. Watching this sweet family interaction instantly transports Kangmin back to his own childhood. He remembered strolling through this very park with his parents, riding on his father's shoulders, and calling the falling pink petals popcorn. His dad would gently laugh and correct him, explaining that they were cherry blossoms, not snacks. He remembered one specific afternoon when his mother suggested they all go to the cinema to catch a movie. His dad asked if he had a film in mind, and he enthusiastically blurted out that he wanted to watch one of those videos where the stepmom gets stuck inside a washing machine, and the helpful stepson comes to her rescue from behind. His mother was left completely mortified, but his father hilariously played along, admitting that he'd actually love to watch that one too. A sudden ping from his phone snaps him violently out of his memories, leaving him thoroughly annoyed that he can't even get 5 minutes of uninterrupted peace. He pulls out the device, which displays a map highlighting his current position and tracking his target. With a dark, focused look in his eyes, he realizes that playtime is officially over. It's time to get to work. He makes his way to a quiet local convenience store, and by the time he arrives, the sun is already dipping below the horizon. Stepping inside, he notices the counter is empty and calls out to see if anyone is managing the shop. Since nobody replies, he wanders over to the tobacco rack to pick out a pack of cigarettes while he waits. Just as his hand hovers over the pack, an older man's voice calls out from behind, questioning if kids his age are even allowed to smoke. Turning around, Kangman calmly walks over to tell the man that he's simply running a quick errand for his dad. He then flashes a sleek, highly unusual black credit card, claiming it belongs to his father. He slides the card onto the counter, asking to run a massive tab on it, but the man dryly informs him that he's just another customer. Apologizing, Kangman explains that after binge-watching Korean dramas abroad, the man looked exactly like the classic store owners in those shows, which led to the misunderstanding. Hearing this, the old man smiles, shocked to encounter another fellow expat who also recently returned from living overseas. Kangman smiles at the coincidence and casually asks if, by any chance, they happen to work for the exact same agency. Kangman is just about to specify his profession as an assassin when the man suddenly slashes a pocket knife straight at his face. The blade moves with such blinding, terrifying speed that for a split second, it looks like our protagonist is a goner right at the start. But once the dust settles, Kangman is shown to have effortlessly deflected the slash using nothing but a package of goods. The target asks if he was sent to end him, and Kangman smiles, praising his sharp instincts and noting he's surprisingly sharp for a traitor. Reaching straight through the shelves, Kangman grabs him by the neck and hurls him across the room, confirming he's there because the man slaughtered several of their top field agents. The man crashes hard onto the floor, but instead of worrying about his injuries, he stares in absolute shock at Kangman's black card. For context, their organization issues clearance cards in tiered colors, going from silver to gold, and finally, black. The legendary black card is reserved exclusively for the elite inner circle, a legendary rank he had never actually seen in person. As a result, he finds it impossible to accept that a mere kid like Kangman could possess such a prestigious, lethal rank. Kangman just smiles warmly, stretching his hand out while politely thanking the old veteran for the high praise. The target then glances at his hands and asks where his weapons are, which actually catches the young assassin off guard. Incredible as it sounds, Kangman confesses that he had to come empty-handed because his gear got confiscated back at airport security. This leaves the target dumbfounded, never expecting a legendary black card agent to be so hilariously disorganized. As he speaks, the older assassin is already stealthily sliding out one of his hidden, detachable blades. With a cold reminder that the ultimate rule of assassination is always carrying a tool, he flings the blade straight at Kangman's face. Unfazed, Kangman reacts with inhuman speed, snatching the flying metal out of the air right before his eyes. The veteran continues his unsolicited lecture, announcing that the second rule is mastering the element of surprise. He instantly follows up with a lightning-fast thrust aimed directly at Kangman's throat, but the boy casually catches his wrist before the metal can even graze his skin. Locking eyes, Kangman asks why a veteran of his legendary status would throw away all the incredible luxuries and privileges of the agency. Curious about the motive behind the betrayal, the young killer waits, only for the old man to respond with a cryptic riddle: a tin can. Glancing back, Kangman notices a canned food container on the shelf behind him, cleanly sliced in half. The target explains that every single minute spent under the agency's thumb made him feel like he was locked inside a suffocating metal tin. Wrenching his arm free, he lunges forward yet again, trying to bury his blade deep into the boy's throat. Kangman effortlessly slips the blow, grabbing the nearby tin can to shield against the incoming slash. The sharp blade shears straight through the container, leaving the young assassin holding nothing but the thin metal lid. Amused by the poetry of it all, Kangman teases the old man, asking if he's some sort of modern Shakespeare. This only agitates the target further, unleashing a frantic flurry of slashes at the boy. He swings with pure desperation, but Kangman parries every move, their clashing metal casting bright sparks through the dim shop. Amid the fierce exchange, the old man continues his speech, claiming that being a mindless puppet for the syndicate is nothing short of a living hell. With intense emotion, he explains that his desperate thirst for true freedom was the sole reason he chose to turn his back on them. The tempo increases as both killers lock into a high-speed, lethal rhythm. A blade whisks dangerously close to Kangman's neck, cleanly slicing his school tie right off. In a spectacular moment of mutual aggression, both launch devastating counterattacks simultaneously. The older assassin manages to slice Kangman's back near his right shoulder, while Kangman grazes the man's cheek with the jagged tin lid. The young killer then asks if the man lost something irreplaceable, noting that nobody fights this desperately unless they've been stripped of everything. With the metal lid still pressed to his bloody face, the old man softly replies that he lost his family. He explains that the syndicate executed them, his eyes briefly flicking toward a dusty framed family portrait resting on the counter. He reveals that the agency tracks and monitors every operative's family as leverage to ensure absolute loyalty. Lashing out once more, the man kicks a bag of white powder directly into the air to blind his opponent. Despite the blinding white cloud, Kangman reacts instantly, lifting the man up and slamming him violently onto the floor. The old man shatters the framed photo as he lands, whispering with a sad smile that his current freedom cost him his family's lives. Kangman is genuinely taken aback that he still chose to rebel, knowing full well the fatal consequences it would bring upon his loved ones. The defeated veteran remains sprawled on the floor as Kangman looks down at him coldly. The old man whispers that this convenience store was a place he frequented regularly, meaning he had built a quiet friendship with the owner over the years. But on one specific visit, the poor shopkeeper looked utterly dead on his feet from overwork. Out of genuine concern, he told the man to just lock up early and go get some sleep. But the owner replied that resting wasn't an option because his family depended on every single cent he made. This answer broke something inside the retired killer, viewing the man as a fool who destroyed his own life just to sustain others. Glancing toward the back office, Kangman spots the shopkeeper's lifeless body slumped in the corner with a bloody head wound. Horrified, Kangman asks if he murdered the innocent man simply because of his cynical outlook on family life. The target snaps, screaming that this endless cycle of self-sacrifice for family makes him absolutely sick. Struggling back to his feet, he mutters that he's certain the old shopkeeper was miserable every day of his life anyway. As a strange red aura fills the space, the target sneers, asking Kangman if his own loyalty is driven by a desire to shield his loved ones. Kangman remains dead silent, prompting the old man to growl that family is nothing but a collar to control you. The words strike a deep chord, leaving the young assassin frozen in place. Seizing the hesitation, the target unleashes a desperate, blinding strike that obliterates the shelf directly behind Kangman. Using the debris as cover, he aims a fatal slash at Kangman's head, mocking any foolish belief in family values. He is positive he's landed the killing blow, but as the dust settles, Kangman has completely disappeared. Suddenly, a clean slash rips through his throat before he can even blink. Kangman had bypassed him with such speed that the dying man could only gasp, asking how he'd been cut so cleanly. Kangman simply holds up the small steel blade, the very same weapon he had caught out of the air earlier. He dryly points out that the first rule of combat is always knowing exactly where your weapon is. Leaving him with one final tip, Kangman tells him never to throw things away unless he's sure where they'll land. As blood pours from his throat, the target's legs give out completely. He collapses to the floor, his remaining weapon slipping away as a dark pool spreads around him. He clutches his neck in a desperate, futile attempt to stop the bleeding. But in his final moments, he realizes that the boy had never even broken a sweat fighting him. Kangman nods, admitting he was only curious to see if there was any honorable reason behind his treason. He assures him that none of this was personal, just standard protocol. Gasping for his final breath, the target mutters that the agency truly spared no expense by sending such a monster to finish him. But Kangman gently shakes his head to clear up the misunderstanding. He leans down to whisper in his ear, revealing that his trip to Korea had absolutely nothing to do with him. As the target stares in shock, Kangman explains that this encounter was merely a minor detour on his itinerary. He confesses that his actual target is an incredibly high-profile individual. This mark is so exceptionally dangerous that even a killer of his caliber is risking everything to get near them. Turning to leave, Kangman tells him that he's finally delivered the absolute freedom he wanted, in the form of eternal rest. Exiting the blood-drenched shop, he dials his handlers to report that the secondary objective has been neutralized. He remarks to himself that the old veteran wasn't a bad warm-up act after all. Now it was time to focus on the main event, but looking at his shredded, blood-soaked clothes, he notes he'll need to buy a fresh school uniform first. With a cold expression, he promises that tomorrow, the real main course begins. True to his word, the next morning finds him walking through the gates of the high school where his true prey awaits. 1 month ago, Kangman sneaked into the heavily guarded estate of a House of Representatives member in the Angeles district, only to find himself surrounded by security forces. Equipped with nothing but a simple revolver, he faces his target, Manuel Santos, who is shielded by heavily armed guards. Yet, Kangman casually mocks him, suggesting he should have just died quietly to save everyone the trouble. Realizing that a deadly professional hitman has come for his head, Manuel begs Kangman to at least spare his family and let them leave. Glancing behind him, Kangman spots Manuel's terrified wife clutching their frightened child. Manuel desperately pleads that they are completely innocent of his dirty business, prompting Kangman to pause and take a deep breath to consider the situation. To everyone's surprise, he calmly informs Manuel that his wife and child are allowed to leave unharmed. As a rule, Kangman follows a rigid personal code. He never harms a soul except his designated target, provided they don't strike him first. Hearing the soft stance, Manuel immediately barks orders at his men to raise their weapons and lock their targets. Mocking Kangman, Manuel sneers that a contractor with such weak sentiments doesn't even deserve a B grade ranking in this line of work. He ridicules him further, admitting he was initially terrified because he mistook Kangman for a legendary operative sent from Batala. Now, about Batala. On the surface, it's a high-class casino reserved for the ultra-wealthy, serving as a hub for extreme high-stakes bets. But behind the flashy facade of this luxury gaming house lies a dark and well-kept secret. In reality, the establishment acts as an open market for assassination contracts, operating so far above the law that even the government is powerless to stop them. Leveraging their unparalleled network, they had recently accepted a massive bounty to eliminate Manuel. A blonde casino dealer, managing the VIP client, fans out a deck of cards across the table and instructs him to draw one. She explains that his choice will decide the operational rank of his assigned assassin, to which the client confidently nods, already familiar with the rules. The client then pulls the ultimate card from the spread, the Ace of Spades. While the dealer is taken aback by his boldness, she gently warns him that hiring an Ace of Spades level operative comes with an astronomical fee. The client doesn't blink, having already stacked piles of rare treasures and wealth to cover the cost. He demands that the hit be executed without a single moment of delay. Returning to the present scene inside the estate, Kangman has neutralized every single guard and placed a neat bullet directly through Manuel's forehead. Lighting up a cigarette amidst the absolute carnage, he reminds the room that he only spares bystanders on the condition that they don't raise a finger against him first. The surviving wife stands frozen in absolute terror, staring down at the bloody end of her husband. Kangman steps closer to her, offering a quiet, cold moment of condolences for her loss. Turning his back to leave, he mutters to her that he fully expects to pay for his dark deeds when his time finally comes. Fast forward to the present. Kangman enters his new classroom, but rather than giving a standard, boring introduction, he opts for a massive aura flex by casually asking the class if anyone has a spare cigarette. Sensing the sheer, overwhelming presence radiating from him, the nervous teacher asks who he is, sensing this kid is the type to walk all over his authority. Kangman flatly responds that he is the new transfer student, prompting the flustered teacher to tell him to write his name on the board. He introduces himself to the class as a simple kid from Daejeon, keeping them entirely in the dark about his true background as an elite assassin from Batala. His sole reason for blending into a high school was to gain a natural point of entry to hunt down the target he was dispatched to South Korea to eliminate. Considering South Korea's tight public safety, Kangman realized he needed an airtight, ordinary cover story to approach his target unnoticed. Although his short introduction secretly carries his true, underlying motives, not a single soul in the classroom notices the double meaning. Prior to his departure, his blonde handler at the casino had briefed him with the available intel. She specified that the mark is a South Korean citizen currently living in Seoul. But there was a massive catch. They didn't actually have a face, an address, or even a clear identity for the target. A stunned Kangman questioned the lack of info, but the dealer confirmed that, as absurd as it sounded, that was the reality of the contract. In short, the hiring client had supplied nothing but a bare name, leaving out any photos, age, or background data. Though the lack of prep details makes the mission highly unconventional, Kangman is a seasoned elite who never backs down from a challenge. Following his initial investigation, he makes his way to his target's suspected classroom, only to look inside and realize the person didn't even show up for school today. While plotting his next logical move, he is interrupted by the loud shouting of two students fighting over who should clear the hallway. Suddenly, a student sporting heavy tattoos grabs the doorframe for leverage and delivers a brutal kick, sending the other boy crashing into the concrete wall. It's clear the tattooed kid is the head of the school's local delinquents, and one of his female companions, Choi Ha-yeon, spots Kangman watching them from down the hall. Pointing him out to the crew, she directs their attention to the newcomer, prompting the tattooed leader to demand if Kangman is just standing there all by himself. Kangman innocently replies that he's alone since he hasn't made any friends yet, while silently deciding it's time to activate his backup strategy. Pretending to play along, Kangman easily integrates into their group, and they lead him to their secluded hideout to smoke and hang out. The gang leader questions him to confirm if he's genuinely a transfer from Daejeon, to which Kangman calmly nods. He then tests him by asking if he's familiar with Lee Sung-won, the notorious heavy hitter and undisputed boss of the Daejeon streets. Sensing a clear test of his street credentials, Kangman plays along without missing a beat. He boasts that not only does he know him, but Lee Sung-won actually threw him a heavy drinking send-off when he heard he was transferring. He claims that after getting completely trashed, Sung-won went wild and smashed the entire karaoke machine to pieces. Ha-yeon is visibly intrigued by his story, asking if he was actually some legendary tough guy back in his hometown. Kangman humbly brushes it off, claiming that he and Sung-won were merely casual acquaintances who hung out once in a while. Buying the act completely, the delinquent leader is thoroughly impressed, convinced that Kangman is a heavy hitter keeping a low profile. He extends his hand toward Kangman, offering to bring him into their inner circle as an ally. Kangman shakes his hand, willingly accepting the gesture since having a few local connections fits perfectly into his plans. They hang out together until late into the night. Once the gang boards the bus and leaves him in the quiet dark, a painful flashback hits him, recalling the day he was abducted as a child and shipped away to the brutal district of Angeles. Walking alone down the dim streets, he contemplates how different his path might have been if that traumatic abduction had never reshaped his destiny. Out of nowhere, Hayan sneaks up from behind, wrapping her arms tightly around his and pressing close to him. She coyly asks if he's heading straight back to his place, and a weary Kangman nods, mentioning he's exhausted from the long day. Flashed with a playful smile, she offers a tempting alternative, suggesting they find somewhere private to unwind together. She leads him straight to a nearby motel room, gently pushing him down onto the soft mattress. Kangman seems totally swept up in the moody lighting of the room and her undeniable charm. Climbing over him with practiced ease, she whispers, asking what sort of fun he wants to have tonight. But breaking the romantic tension entirely, Kangman looks at her and drops a chilling question. Is this what you kids call bullying? Instantly, the rest of Hayan's gang steps out from the shadows of the room, holding up phones that had been recording his every move. The punks burst into obnoxious laughter, mocking him for getting so easily excited over a girl's basic touch. Hayan herself breaks character, giggling as she asks him to give her performance an honest rating. Quietly, Kangman asks what the point of this setup is, but the gang leader just smirks, turning the question back on him with an attitude. As it happens, the leader already knew the Daejeon story was a complete lie. Sungwon has suffered from a chronic liver condition since childhood and is physically incapable of drinking alcohol. To make matters worse, the leader had personally called Sungwon, who confirmed he had absolutely no clue who a Kangman was. Kangman slowly sits up, pretending to be clueless, while the gang keeps badgering him about how terrible his cover story was. While Kangman tries to play nice and de-escalate, one of the thugs steps up and delivers a hard slap across his face. Laughing, they declare that from today on, his sole purpose in their class is to act as their personal automated door opener. The punk then grabs his collar and tears his uniform shirt open to humiliate him further. But as the fabric tears open, they are met with a sight that instantly freezes the blood in their veins. Rewinding a bit, back before his deployment, Kangman had initially turned down the assignment because of the complete lack of target parameters. When the dealer demanded an explanation, he bluntly pointed out that Korea has thousands of people sharing that exact name, and unless he was expected to commit a mass purge, the contract was a joke. Deep down, Kangman also harbored a quiet fear of returning. He worried that being back on home soil might trigger unresolved emotions and force him to act recklessly. Smirking, the dealer reassured him that this particular assignment was unlike anything they had ever handled before. Given its high-stakes nature, success would yield the ultimate prize: permanent, unconditional retirement and complete freedom from the syndicate. The mere mention of freedom stunned Kangman. His handler was genuinely offering a way out of Batala for good. This was the final retirement contract he had dreamed of, making failure an absolutely unacceptable outcome. Now back in the motel room, the high school thugs gasp in horror at the sight of his physique. He is covered in brutal, deep-set scars, and his build is far too muscular for a normal teenager. Kangman lets out a chilling smile. The boy who struck him has officially triggered his primary rule, granting him full permission to retaliate. With lightning speed, Kangman swings his hand back and delivers a devastating slap that physically deforms the boy's face, launching him backward across the room. The rest of the gang stands frozen in absolute disbelief, watching their strongest fighter get neutralized with a single, casual slap. Kangman lets out a soft sigh, realizing he held back too little, though baiting them into striking first was his plan all along when he set up his weak transfer student persona. Exuding a terrifying pressure, Kangman slowly balls his hand into a tight fist, mockingly inviting the rest of them to take their best shot. 6 years ago on Kamatayan, a desolate, private island owned by Batala, a young Kangman underwent hellish endurance training, forced to remain submerged underwater while chained to a heavy industrial tire. Known simply as Trainee Number 55, he pushed through the brutal regimen, demonstrating the unnatural ability to hold his breath underwater for incredibly long stretches. When he finally dragged his exhausted frame onto the rocky shore, clinging to life, small sea creatures were literally stuck to his skin. He forced himself onto his feet, dragging his feet toward the training marker. However, right at the finish line, his cold-faced instructor pressed a gun to his temple, announcing he had failed the time limit by 60 seconds. Even with a barrel pressed against his skull, Kangman's eyes remained completely vacant and calm. A loud bang echoes, and in a flash of motion, Kangman disarms the trainer and drives the sharp staff of the finish line flag straight through his instructor's hand. Turning the seized handgun back on his captor, the wounded instructor actually smiles, praising Kangman for using his surroundings so instinctively to turn the tables. He is highly impressed by the boy's complete lack of survival panic, noting that he didn't even blink at the threat of death. Kangmin coldly replies that he isn't stupid. He knew the first chamber held a blank to prevent any accidental self-harm during training. He then pulls the slide back with a heavy click, reminding the trainer that every round after that blank is lethal, live ammunition. Taking careful aim at the instructor's forehead, the screen cuts away just as a solitary gunshot echoes across the empty island. Back in the peaceful present, stuck dealing with mere schoolboys in a safe, civilized nation so unlike his violent childhood, Kangmin decides that slaughtering these kids is uncalled for. Sighing softly, he resolves to manage this confrontation using a non-lethal approach. As he crouches to gather the broken buttons torn from his shirt, he searches his mind for a solid, justifiable excuse to teach them a lesson. To avoid making this look like an unprovoked, one-sided beating, he wants to frame it so they clearly strike first, making whatever pain he inflicts look like self-defense. Deliberately turning his back to give them an opening, one of the gang members quickly grabs a heavy metal fire extinguisher. The punk laughs, mocking him for worrying about cheap buttons when he's about to be put in an intensive care unit. He swings the heavy canister directly at Kangmin's head, asking mockingly if his medical insurance is up to date. To the boy's absolute horror, Kangmin effortlessly catches the flying cylinder with a single hand and crushes the thick metal shell with his bare fingers. The punk freezes in sheer disbelief, realizing this monster just crumpled a pressurized metal tank like an empty soda can. Moving on to the next phase of his plan, Kangmin decides it's time to deliver an unforgettable demonstration of power. He grips the boy's face in his massive hand and slams him violently into the mattress, showcasing his terrifying strength. With the boy's head buried deep into the broken frame of the bed, the surviving delinquents realize with terrifying clarity that they are dealing with a predator. Before they can even process the panic, Kangmin vanishes, suddenly whispering directly into their ears from behind, asking for their cooperation. Haiyan and her remaining friend jump back, screaming in sheer panic at his supernatural speed. Desperate, Haiyan tries to play the victim card, questioning if he's actually the kind of coward who would strike a defenseless woman. Ignoring her completely, Kangmin demands to know the whereabouts of their missing friend who didn't show up to class. Cornering the remaining male punk, Kangmin steps into his personal space, pressing him for an exact location. The trembling teen stutters, asking why he's searching for him, only for Kangmin to lean in and ask with a bone-chilling tone if there is any reason he shouldn't. Terrified, the boy decides to make a break for it, shouting that telling him would only guarantee a beating anyway. He bolts into the adjoining bathroom, slamming and locking the heavy door behind him. Kangmin casually walks in after him, assuring him in a calm voice that he won't lay out a hand on him. To his surprise, the small bathroom appears empty, but in a desperate move, the boy drops down silently from above, landing right behind Kangmin. He swiftly wraps a flexible metal shower hose around Kangmin's throat, gloating that his panic was nothing but a clever trap. Pulling the cord tight with smug confidence, he boasts that his true life's dream is to win Best Supporting Actor at the prestigious Blue Dragon Film Awards. But his theatrical moment is instantly ruined when Kangmin casually grabs the metal hose and tears it apart like cheap thread. Turning around slowly, Kangmin looks at him and calmly remarks that he's actually not a bad actor himself. The terrified boy can only watch in silence as Kangmin delivers a swift kick, launching his body into the porcelain sink and knocking him out cold. This marks the successful completion of the third phase of his psychological breakdown, breaking the bully's will with absolute fear. Haiyan lets out a blood-curdling scream, grabbing her trembling leader and frantically begging him to take their scooter and escape immediately. Kangmin steps out of the bathroom, casually asking why they're making such a big fuss when they could just answer his simple query. As Kangmin slowly advances, Haiyan completely panics, hysterically screaming at the tattooed boy to get them out of there. Instead of fleeing, the prideful leader walks toward the exit, boasting that he is actually a premier candidate representing the national MMA team. He claims he had his entire career perfectly mapped out, undefeated until he took things too far and shattered his last opponent. To show off, he grips the solid brass doorknob and crushes the metal flat before charging toward Kangmin with an eager, wild grin on his face. He throws himself forward, aiming a massive, bone-shattering strike directly at Kangmin's head. Meanwhile, in an adjacent motel room, a sleazy guy is busy harassing a girl, only to be interrupted when the gang leader is launched directly through the drywall. The leader lies thoroughly, broken by Kangmin's monstrous counterstrike, perfectly marking the execution of Step 4. This phase was designed to completely shatter their collective morale, and he had a very specific reason for following such a precise checklist. Back in the room, Haiyan frantically claws at the exit, but her own leader's display of strength had broken the doorknob, locking her inside. Like a specter from a nightmare, Kangmin appears right behind her shoulder, whispering to ask what she's trying to accomplish. While she freezes in terror, Kangmin calmly reaches over and shows her how to easily bypass the broken lock. Yet another calculated move on his part. His strategy was simple. Once his victim is utterly consumed by pure terror, offering a small gesture of mercy makes them entirely compliant. Haiyan collapses to her knees, weeping and begging for her life, but Kangmin reassures her that he has no interest in striking a girl, asking only for a small favor. Gently patting her hair, Kangmin whispers that out of everyone in her foolish gang, she is the only one smart enough to help him. When he asks if she'll cooperate, she frantically nods her head in agreement, too terrified to say no. With her complete attention secured, Kangmin poses his first question, demanding the truth about the student who skipped class. Meanwhile, far away inside a dimly lit underground bunker, a gang of criminals is busy celebrating a highly lucrative blackmail operation. We start with the gang's leader stuffing his face with delicious beef, completely enjoying himself as he brags to his crew about how amazing their life is. That's when one of his goons points out the massive online traffic they've been getting, warning him that the police might trace it back to them. The worried lackey suggests packing up and moving their base immediately, but the boss tells him to chill out since they received the clip on Telegram and the servers are hosted in another country anyway. With supreme confidence, the leader tells his subordinate that their setup is so incredibly safe that even the FBI wouldn't stand a chance of finding them. The words have barely left his mouth when a sudden knock on the front door interrupts him. The boss orders one of his guys to check who it is, and when the door opens, a random dude wearing a strange t-shirt casually walks right in. This blonde-haired guy is none other than Jang Hun-soo, and the very first thing he asks the gang is about that specific video. He demands to know if the video was uploaded from this very room, but because Hyun-soo doesn't look anything like a police officer, the boss demands to know his identity instead. Completely brushing off their questions, Hyun-soo simply demands that they delete the video, which immediately triggers the largest goon in the room. Just as this giant is about to lung forward and crush Hyun-soo, a deafening gunshot echoes through the space. Suddenly, blood splatters across the walls, leaving the remaining thugs covering their ears in absolute horror. Before they can even process the situation, they see that their massive buddy has just been shot straight in the head by Hyun-soo. The entire gang loses their minds, realizing they are dealing with a live weapon, while Hyun-soo casually wipes a stray blood droplet from his mouth and coolly repeats his demand to delete the video. Right at that moment, the leader notices something off and realizes it wasn't a real bullet, especially as the giant goon slowly struggles back to his feet. He tries to catch Hyun-soo off guard from behind, but this time, he takes a direct shot right to his face. By now, the entire gang puts two and two together, realizing they are only dealing with a modified, high-velocity BB gun. Believing they have absolutely nothing to fear from a toy, they all charge at him at once. Unfortunately for them, this turns out to be a terrible mistake, as they get absolutely wrecked in seconds. The leader is busy stuffing cash into a duffel bag, only to look up and realize that every single one of his men is already unconscious on the floor. Suddenly, Hyun-soo appears right behind him, pressing the barrel against his skull and warning him to delete the clip if he wants to avoid sharing his crew's painful fate. Desperate to save himself, the boss quickly points to a hard drive across the room, telling Hyun-soo to just unplug it and destroy it. Still, curiosity gets the better of the boss, and he asks why Hyun-soo is taking such extreme measures for this. He asks if the person in the video paid him to clean up the mess. That's when Hyun-soo furiously snaps, revealing that he himself is the star of that embarrassing video. Furious that the world has seen his embarrassingly tiny private parts online, a humiliated Hyun-soo loses his temper and executes the boss on the spot. As it happens, Hyun-soo is the very student Kangmin was searching for, and Kangmin is already well aware of his preference for using high-powered BB guns. But Kangmin is on a whole different level, keeping a massive arsenal of weapons hidden right in his bedroom. By the next day at school, the local bullies have been thoroughly tamed, serving as Kangmin's personal lackeys after the beating he gave them. Hyeon is the only one whose face is completely unscathed, and she curiously asks Kangmin why he wanted to gather them all. Kangmin simply replies that he wants to pick up right where they left off their discussion yesterday. The atmosphere turns serious as Kangmin asks if anything interesting ever happened with that former friend of theirs. In a flashback, we see Hyeon visiting a local prize stall, trying to win a weirdly creepy stuffed toy by shooting down various targets. But the game's gun turns out to be absolute garbage, which is exactly when Hyun-soo makes his grand entrance. As a returning student, he confidently steps up and easily nails every target while Hyeon presses close against him from behind. Watching this, Hyeon's friends are absolutely speechless at his incredible marksmanship skills. They playfully tease him, saying the special forces would love to recruit someone like him, and before long, Hyun-soo hands over the one prize to Hyeon. A grateful Hyeon thanks him warmly, promising to treat him or make it up to him during their next hangout. Flustered by her close physical contact and thrilled by her promise to pay him back, Hyun-soo's imagination immediately starts running wild. Snapping back to reality, Hyeon wonders why someone like Kangmin would show such a keen interest in a guy like Hyun-soo. Honestly, she just wanted to erase Hyun-soo from her memory completely, but as she mutters this aloud, Kangmin suddenly pops up and teases her for talking to herself. Blushing slightly, Hyeon asks him why he insisted on meeting up with her privately over the weekend. Kangmin gently touches her cheek, reminding her of the favor she promised to grant him back when they were at the motel. He pulls out his smartphone, showing her a list of popular dating spots, and requests that she act as his personal tour guide. Behind her smile, Hyeon knows his innocent act is completely fake, considering he single-handedly wrecked her entire gang while keeping a perfectly calm face. She convinces herself that Kangmin must have a crush on her, which explains why he's asking her for a personal city tour. But as their little excursion begins, a mysterious figure lurking in the shadows snaps a photo of the two of them. Their first destination is a traditional restaurant famous for serving a massive feast featuring 80 different side dishes. Hyeon playfully teases him for having terrible taste in dining spots, pointing out that he clearly has zero experience when it comes to dating girls. With a quiet apology, Kangmin admits he's never really had close friends in his life, so he had no clue what kind of places are good for eating out. Noticing his slight awkwardness, Hyeon decides to ease the tension by digging into the food first. She flashes a playful grin at him, asking what the real motive was behind bringing her to such a fancy spot. Taking a bite, she admits that the food is absolutely delicious, while from a distance, the stalker's camera clicks yet again. Next up, they head to a local park to feed some alpacas, only for a grumpy animal to spit directly into Kangmin's face. Another candid photo captures them, laughing together before they move on to visit an art gallery. There, they get a first-hand look at how bizarre and confusing modern art has become nowadays. Afterward, they stop by a luxury Dior boutique, where Hyeon insists on having Kangmin act as her personal photographer. He snaps so many photos that he worries her phone will run out of memory, but she confidently boasts that her device has a full terabyte of storage. When Kangmin asks why she needs so many shots, she playfully responds that a masterpiece like herself deserves to be well documented. The fun continues well into the night, but before calling it a day, Hyeon suggests they play a quick shooting game at a nearby booth. She drags Kangmin to the exact same prize stall where she had first encountered Hyun-soo. The vendor confidently offers a challenge: land just one successful shot out of 10, and he can take home a cute stuffed animal. Amused by the simple rules, Kangmin figures that hitting a single target will be a total walk in the park. But what he doesn't realize is that the toy rifle is completely rigged to shoot crooked. The owner smirks, knowing that even a trained Navy SEAL would struggle to hit anything with this crooked gun. Kangmin pulls the trigger for his first shot, only for the pellet to fly completely wide of the target. Hyeon giggles and teases him, saying he won't be landing any prizes tonight if he keeps shooting like that. Determined to prove himself, Kangmin proposes a little wager. He declares that if he clears every single target and wins the prize, she will owe him another favor. The owner is still busy chuckling to himself when Kangmin suddenly unleashes a rapid-fire sequence, nailing every target with zero effort. The shocked vendor scratches his head in disbelief, seriously wondering if this high schooler is secretly a professional hitman. Kangmin then hands the rifle over to Hyeon, stepping behind her to gently adjust her stance. And once more, their close interaction is secretly captured on video by the observer. In the end, the grand prize they walk away with is just a ridiculous, bouncy little doll. Walking back home, Hyeon can't help but wonder what kind of favor Kangmin is going to ask from her this time. But it turns out he already made his request, which was for her to upload a photo of their date on her social media. Clutching the goofy toy to her chest, she replays the day's events in her mind, trying to cover her deeply blushing face. She is so completely distracted looking at their photos on her phone that she doesn't even realize she has arrived right outside her apartment. Her heart drops in sheer shock when she looks up and spots Hyun-soo waiting there, staring at her with an unsettling, creepy expression. The toy slips from her numb fingers as she demands to know what on earth he is doing outside her apartment. Instead of answering, Hyun-soo violently grabs her by the neck, muttering that standing outside her door brings back memories of his very first visit. In a flashback, we learn that Hyun-soo, Hyeon, and her regular crew had once gathered at her place to drink and party. With everyone drinking heavily, Hyeon warned them all to behave, but Hyun-soo promised her that he would make sure everyone stayed in check. Grateful, Hyeon complimented him, saying he was incredibly dependable and wondering if it was because he was older. Hyun-soo simply offered a reassuring smile, telling her to put her complete trust in him. But later that night, once everyone else had passed out from drinking, Hyun-soo crossed the line and touched her inappropriately. Hyeon didn't hesitate to report his behavior, a move that completely shattered his future. He got expelled from school and was disowned by his own family, which is why he blames Hyeon for all his misfortunes. Defending herself, Hyeon snaps back that he brought all of this upon himself because he's nothing but a disgusting pervert. An enraged Hyun-soo fires back, accusing Hyeon of being the one who actually led him on in the first place. He claims she was acting overly touchy with him and casually promising to repay him for his help. Asserting that she teased him, he whips out his smartphone, claiming that she is still playing the same manipulative games today. It turns out he saw the social media photo she shared, and in his delusional mind, he believes she posted it just to make him jealous. Hearing this absurd theory, Hyeon is overcome with disgust, tightly balling her hands into fists. She lands a hard slap across his face, screaming that he's a complete psychopath, but Hyun-soo responds by firing 2 warning shots right past her. He even turns his weapon on her brand new stuffed toy, shredding it to pieces. Hyun-soo grimly tells her that since the day he got expelled, he has been constantly training for this very reunion. In an incredibly creepy tone, he brags about filming his target practices and says he can't wait to show her the footage. As he pins Hyeon against the wall, a mysterious hand suddenly reaches out from behind the door, pressing a drugged cloth over her face to knock her unconscious. The savior is none other than Kangmin, who casually remarks that he didn't expect Hyun-soo to take the bait so quickly. It turns out Kangmin set up the whole date, hiring photographers to shadow them to lure Hyun-soo out, and those secret paparazzi were actually Hyeon's bullied gang members. Though the gang is annoyed at being used as errand boys, they know better than to refuse Kangmin, even if they're confused why he's doing all this when he doesn't even like Hyeon. They can't wrap their heads around why he went through all the trouble of making her post those pictures online. As Hyeon slumps over asleep, Kangmin kicks the door open and mocks Hyun-soo, chuckling that such a simple trick was enough to drag him out of hiding. Glurling with absolute rage, Hyun-soo demands to know if Kangmin is supposed to be her boyfriend. Kangmin delivers a sarcastic retort, asking Hyun-soo if he looks like her girlfriend instead. Losing his temper, Hyun-soo pulls his gun and fires a shot, but Kangmin effortlessly sidesteps the projectile. Kangmin teases him for shooting without warning, while Hyun-soo snarls that once Kangmin is dead, Hyeon will finally belong to him. He aims directly at Kangmin's head, but Kangmin swiftly disarms him and suggests a friendly duel instead, with the winner earning the right to stay with Hyeon. But Kangmin drops a chilling warning, stating that his own gun is powerful enough to end things in a single hit. To understand how we got here, we flash back to find that one of Hyun-soo's private training videos had somehow been leaked online. He was absolutely losing his mind trying to figure out who could have leaked the footage. His prime suspect was the sketchy repair technician who had mysteriously charged him next to nothing for a fix. While lost in thought, he walks into his bedroom only to find a mysterious intruder sitting there with a gun, casually discussing the leaked clip. The stranger comments on how incredibly bizarre it is that Hyun-soo filmed himself practicing various shooting stances and analyzing his own mistakes. The weapon in the stranger's hand is actually Hyun-soo's own gun, which he found nearby, and he claims that Hyun-soo is the exact kind of talent they need. Fed up with the cryptic talk, Hyun-soo confronts him directly and demands to know his true identity. The intruder reveals he is an agent for the network, an underground organization that produces profitable content for a specific audience. Essentially, this stranger is a scout looking to recruit unstable individuals like Hyun-soo. The recruiter, named Min, notes that Hyun-soo's numerous online controversies make him highly entertaining to their viewers. With that in mind, he formally invites Hyun-soo to join their lucrative operation. Cut back to the present, and Hyun-soo is locked in a high-stakes shooting duel against Kangmin. Skeptical of Kangmin's claim about his weapon's lethal power, Hyun-soo mockingly dares him to pull the trigger. He even grabs the barrel and presses it against his own forehead, taunting Kangmin to fire. Kangmin doesn't hesitate and shoots, sending Hyun-soo flying backward across the room in agonizing pain. While it was actually just a non-lethal rubber bullet, Kangmin acts completely clueless, pretending he had no idea what was loaded. Kangmin claims he ordered live rounds and expected them in the mail, but Hyun-soo grunts that the organization never delivers real ammunition. Hyun-soo sneaks his hand inside his coat, suddenly firing a hidden backup gun right through the fabric to surprise Kangmin. But Kangmin easily evades the shot, pointing out that his body language gave the trick away completely. Hyun-soo fires again, but as Kangmin dodges, the stray shot completely shatters the stuffed toy on the cabinet, the very one Hyeon had won with him. Shocked by the sheer destructive force of the weapon, Kangmin wonders if this thing is actually classified as a toy. He quickly deduces that the weapon was customized by a professional craftsman rather than built by Hyun-soo himself. Ignoring his comments, Hyun-soo keeps firing wildly in hopes of grazing him, but Kangmin effortlessly dances around every shot. Kangmin points out how surprising it is that despite committing several crimes with this gun, Hyun-soo has somehow never been caught by the police. He mockingly asks Hyun-soo if he has a powerful syndicate protecting him from the law. As it turns out, the network is a sprawling underground cartel in Korea that recruits high schoolers all over the nation. They use highly decentralized, independent cells, which makes tracking down their leadership nearly impossible. Despite the challenge, Kangmin is relentless and confident he will dismantle them, especially since his ultimate target is deep within their ranks. Noticing Kangmin lost in his thoughts mid-fight, an insulted Hyun-soo flies into a rage. He rushes forward, shoving the muzzle right beneath Kangmin's chin, snarling and asking if he thinks this is a game. He pulls the trigger, but Kangmin's reflexes are too quick. He slaps the hand away, causing the shot to miss entirely. Ultimately, Kangmin targeted Hyun-soo simply because his investigation revealed the boy's ties to the network. Hyun-soo is absolutely furious that none of his moves have managed to connect. He's humiliated that Kangmin not only took Hyeon away, but is now openly mocking his skills. He chases Kangmin frantically around the apartment, completely unaware that he's merely a pawn being used to reach a much bigger fish. Just when Hyun-soo thinks he has cornered Kangmin for the kill, Kangmin slips underneath his guard, aiming his barrel directly at Hyun-soo's head. With zero hesitation, Kangmin unleashes a volley of shots straight into his face, leaving him bruised and sending him crashing backward. Kangmin calmly strolls over to the refrigerator, grabs a cold soda, and asks a battered Hyun-soo if he really wants to keep going. Completely exhausted and bruised from the impacts, Hyun-soo is forced to drop his tough guy act. Whining, he insists to Kangmin that he isn't the real villain of this story. He reveals that his anger stems entirely from the way Hyeon led him on and then tossed him aside. He claims he's simply a heartbroken victim of unrequited love, but Kangmin is completely unconvinced by his sob story. He doesn't stop there. He mocks him, pointing out that he's only blabbering to give his own fragile ego a boost. Struggling back onto his feet, Hyunsoo raises his gun and points it directly at Kangmin. After rambling about how passionately he loves Hyeon, he suddenly whips out a real firearm and targets the unconscious girl. Driven by the toxic mindset of if I can't have her, nobody will, he prepares to end her life right then and there. Crying like a maniac, he empties the entire magazine. But as the dust clears, we see Kangmin guarding Hyeon with a detached refrigerator door acting as an improvised shield. Staring at the door, Kangmin is genuinely surprised it actually stopped the bullets, tossing out a quick compliment about the sheer build quality of Korean appliances. Hyunsoo's jaw drops at that superhuman speed, and he demands to know what kind of freak would jump headfirst into active gunfire just to rescue some girl. Hyunsoo completely loses his sanity, jumping to the wild conclusion that Kangmin went through all this because he's secretly in love with Hyeon. His stomach churns as he glances toward the bed, instantly driving himself crazy with the assumption that they've already slept together. Furious, Hyunsoo reloads to try again, but before he can pull the trigger, a sniper-like round tears through the air, obliterating his weapon along with his finger. As Hyunsoo starts screaming in absolute agony, Kangmin calmly tells him to keep his voice down so he doesn't disturb the neighborhood. He warns him to shut his mouth immediately, threatening to take off the rest of his hand if he makes another sound. Kangmin reveals that he's finally drawn his actual weapon, and he won't hesitate to keep using it from here on out. Staring through the rising gun smoke, a terrified Hyunsoo breaks down, pleading for his life and crying that he's too young to die. Panicking for his survival, he turns around and books it out of the apartment as fast as his legs can carry him. Running is completely useless, though, as a hooded Kangmin keeps pace right behind him without breaking a sweat. Hyunsoo tears through the crowded streets like prey fleeing a predator, shoving innocent bystanders out of his way. With every glance over his shoulder, he sees his stalker closing in, making him wonder if this nightmare is ever going to end. In total despair, he shouts out to the heavens, demanding to know what crime he committed to deserve this. In his delusional mind, he's the actual victim here because Hyeon supposedly played with his feelings and discarded him. Shortly after, he stumbles into a busy intersection dominated by a massive digital billboard overhead. As it turns out, this was exactly where Kangmin wanted him to run all along, and he fell right into the trap. Kangmin pulls out his smartphone and seamlessly mirrors his device's display onto the giant public screen. Midway through crossing the street, Hyunsoo looks up only to freeze in horror as his own private, embarrassing video starts broadcasting to the public. He stops dead in his tracks, dying of embarrassment, which only intensifies when onlookers start loudly, making fun of his tiny package. Desperately clutching his pants, he tries to plead his case and explain the misunderstanding to the growing crowd. Spinning around, he catches Kangmin watching him, and the realization finally hits him that this guy is the mastermind behind the broadcast. Right at that moment, the pedestrian light switches from green to red, but a blind with rage Hyunsoo completely misses the warning. He charges toward Kangmin to force him to turn off the video. But out of nowhere, a speeding truck plows into him, sending him flying like a rag doll. The crowd stands frozen in sheer terror, wondering if they just witnessed a death, while Kangmin casually turns on his heel and walks away. He acknowledges that he hadn't planned for a traffic accident, but shrugs it off, figuring the guy got exactly what was coming to him. It doesn't take long for the school delinquents to hear about Hyunsoo's spectacular downfall, which is natural given that the clip is trending everywhere on social media. Meanwhile, Hyeon feels deeply uneasy knowing that the guy was run over by a truck on the exact same day he invaded her home. On top of that, she's dealing with a massive headache and can barely piece together anything that happened the previous day. Her last clear memory is blacking out after Hyunsoo showed up, though she has a faint, blurry image of Kangmin being there too. As it happens, the mysterious salesman had also paid her apartment a visit while she was unconscious. He had brought along a professional cleanup crew to erase any trace of the gunfight from the apartment. With only disjointed fragments of memory left, Hyeon remains completely in the dark about what truly transpired. Later, as Kangmin walks down the alley near his hideout, grumbling about how his fake underage status prevents him from buying cigarettes, he bumps into the salesman again. The salesman immediately hands him a business card representing the network, praising his flashy stunt with the billboard. Kangmin isn't shocked by the contact, knowing that targeting one of their associates was bound to draw their attention sooner or later. He's actually pleased that his strategy is paying off, as this is his golden ticket to infiltrate their organization. Though he could have tried climbing their ranks the slow, conventional way, he has absolutely no patience for that. Aiming straight for the top, Kangmin demands that the salesman bypass the hierarchy and take him directly to the boss. When the salesman tries to play dumb, Kangmin presses a gun concealed inside a plastic bag right against his chest and repeats his demand. In a flashback, we see Kangmin visiting his handler's house, where his stealthy entrance through the window earned him a pair of garden shears pointed at his face. Without breaking a sweat, Kangmin intercepts the sharp blades using nothing but his passport. The handler is taken aback to see him, questioning why he's still hanging around instead of being on a flight to Korea. Kangmin casually jokes that pigeons hijacked the runway, asking if he can just crash at her place for a quick nap instead. Handing back the shears, he playfully teases her, claiming he can never fall asleep without a comfortable lap pillow. Ignoring his flirtatious banter, the handler gets straight to business, asking for the real reason behind his visit. Kangmin points out that while hitmen usually receive fake covers, the new profile he was issued actually features his real name. Every detail is spot on, right down to his actual date of birth. When he asks if she's plotting something, she clarifies that it's a gesture of goodwill, not a conspiracy. She explains that once this final job is completed, his identity as Spade A will be erased, allowing him to live a normal life as Kangmin. Kangmin admits he finds the concept of freedom confusing, noting that even when he assassinated global elites, he was only ever paid in cash. It makes him highly suspicious that taking out one random Korean citizen would suddenly buy him his entire freedom. The handler advises him to stop overthinking, explaining that the terms were set directly by the top brass. Amused that even his handler is kept in the dark, he gets a sharp reminder from her that she only passes along concrete facts. She hands him a file she meant to deliver in Korea, detailing how the target has built a highly secretive, cellular syndicate where only a fraction of its members have been identified. She advises him that his initial step should be making contact with one of their active field operatives. Kangmin is taken aback to see that the list is full of high schoolers, but she warns him not to let their ages fool him. She stresses that this particular syndicate is deeply entrenched in the criminal underworld. Cut back to the present, where the salesman calmly asks Kangmin to lower the weapon, only for Kangmin to pull the trigger straight into his chest. But it's just a toy replica, and Kangmin is left slightly disappointed by the salesman's complete lack of fear. The salesman counterpoints, remarking how amusing it is that a supposed bad boy teenager is playing around with plastic toys. When asked how he figured it out, the salesman logically points out that high school kids don't normally walk around with actual military firearms. He adds to his explanation by criticizing its lightweight plastic feel and the absolutely terrible paint job. Instead of dropping the subject, he thoroughly roasts every single defect on the toy before finally turning the tables with a question. Leaning in, he whispers directly into Kangmin's ear, demanding to know his true agenda and why he's targeting the network. Grossed out, Kangmin recoils and snaps at him for acting like an absolute creep. He points out the irony, reminding the salesman that he was the one waiting right outside Kangmin's residence in the first place. Turning to leave, the salesman leaves him with an invitation to meet him at the specified address tomorrow. Before disappearing into the shadows, the man drops a chilling observation. He mentions that despite the plastic toy in his hand, the distinct scent of real gunpowder is coming from him. Sure enough, Kangmin had a live weapon tucked away behind his back, leaving him quite impressed by the salesman's sharp senses. This confirms Kangmin's suspicion that this salesman is no ordinary civilian, but an experienced contract killer. Back at his base, Kangmin contacts his agency to report that the network has made official contact. His handler warns him that while they pose as a simple high school gang, they are actually a massive, deeply structured criminal cartel. She reveals that this syndicate operates as Korea's premier criminal network, much like how Batala uses a casino cover. They essentially exploit naive teenagers as shields to keep police attention away from their darker underground operations. Even so, she admits that their intel on this network remains highly limited. In fact, they could very well be the Korean equivalent of Batala itself. While she finds it impressive that he caught their eye so quickly, Kangmin doesn't share her enthusiasm. He points out that despite all their extensive operations, they are still light years away from their main target, Lee Sun. To corner a ghost like him, Kangmin realizes he needs to accelerate his timeline significantly. He's also highly annoyed by Hyunsu's sudden demise under a truck, as he was a prime source of information. Unbeknownst to everyone, however, Hyunsu survived the crash and is currently recovering in a hospital ward. Stuck in bed, he fumes with rage upon watching the news report that the police have made zero progress in finding the mastermind behind his public humiliation. Suddenly, he notices an unfamiliar doctor standing by his bedside, quietly chuckling at his expense. Hyunsu snaps at the man, angrily telling him to shut his mouth because none of this is a joke. When the doctor asks why some hacker would target him, Hyunsu snaps back that the guy was a dangerous assassin carrying a lethal firearm. The doctor seems taken aback by the presence of firearms outside of a place like America, though Hyunsu is just as bewildered by the whole situation. Realizing that Hyunsu is completely clueless about the bigger picture, the doctor quietly approaches his IV line. He bluntly tells him that he was hoping to extract some intel, but since he's useless, his part in this play is officially over. With a sinister grin, he begins tampering with the medical tubes connected to the boy. Tossing the empty syringe onto the bedside table, the imposter tells him his cause of death will simply be reported as an unfortunate overdose. Hyunsu starts panicking frantically, unable to comprehend what chemical is being introduced to his bloodstream. Before he can even call for help, the lethal substance takes effect, tearing through his biological system. Violent convulsions grip his body as he shrieks in agony, pleading with the faux physician to free him from the restraints. As the boy thrashes helplessly, the killer leans in to whisper his true affiliation with the network. And within seconds, dark blood begins leaking from his eyes, nose, and mouth. Following a final, desperate convulsion, Hyun-soo goes still, leaving the imposter admiring his grim handiwork with morbid fascination. Meanwhile, Kangmin arrives at the designated rendezvous point only to find the area completely deserted. A moment later, the same fake doctor approaches him, wearing a charming, calm smile instead of his usual murderous grin. Kangmin complains about the tardiness, and the doctor apologetically mentions he was tied up with a minor patient issue. Kangmin demands to know where the previous salesman went, questioning why he's being met by some teenager in a casual hoodie. He jokingly asks if this is some kind of multi-level marketing scam where they lure you in with a fancy salesman first. The youth laughs it off, hinting that despite his plain outfit, he holds immense leverage. He pulls out a sleek key fob and presses the unlock button. With a beep, a massive, luxurious Rolls-Royce flashes its lights directly behind a stunned Kangmin. Absolutely starstruck, Kangmin runs over to inspect the vehicle, practically drooling over it while declaring that joining their crew was his best life decision. The driver gestures for him to get in, and Kangmin wastes no time hopping into the luxury cabin. Poking his head out of the window to catch the wind, he starts excitedly rattling off the premium specs of the vehicle. The driver mildly warns him about the safety hazards of leaning out like that, but Kangmin simply shrugs him off. The imposter doctor then starts listing, in graphic detail, the horrific physical trauma they'd experienced in a highway collision. Deeply disturbed by the morbid description, Kangmin pulls his head back inside and asks if he majored in forensics or something. The driver chuckles, pointing out that an elite assassin like Kangmin should know far more about death than a mere civilian. Kangmin tries playing the innocent student, but his act falls completely flat when the guy addresses him by his classified operative code name. Kangmin freezes in his seat, his pupils dilating as extreme caution replaces his playful demeanor. The fake doctor then delivers the ultimate bombshell, introducing himself as the elusive mastermind Kangmin had been searching for, Lee Sun. In a brief flashback, we see the salesman reporting back to his young superior, Lee Sun. He confirmed that every shred of evidence at the scene, fingerprints, blood spatter, and security tapes, had been scrubbed clean. He adds that while all digital footprints were deleted, the surviving witness, Hayan, was completely uninjured. To neutralize her without violence, they administered specialized amnestic drugs to wipe her short-term memory. Lee Sun finds it highly intriguing that in an apartment shot to pieces, the girl didn't take a single scratch. He starts rambling in complex medical jargon, explaining why her lack of physical trauma is actually a fascinating anomaly. Seeing his subordinate's blank expression, he smiles and jokes that he might have binge-watched too many medical shows last night. Lee Sun then pulls out his camera to take goofy selfies, grinning like a complete psychopath. The salesman simply rolls his eyes at his boss's childish antics. He informs him that he completed a full background check on Kangmin, which immediately piques his boss's interest. Dropping the phone, Lee Sun listens as the salesman reveals that while official records list Kangmin as a regular student, his entire educational history is an elaborate fabrication. By routing the inquiry through an overseas broker, they uncovered the chilling truth. He's actually a professional hitman trained in the Philippines. Lee Sun's playful smile vanishes, finding it hard to believe that an elite assassin would bother brawling with mere teenagers. The salesman agrees, explaining that further digging revealed his direct affiliation with the feared Batala Syndicate. Lee Sun's expression grows intense as he asks the salesman to repeat the name of the organization to make sure he heard correctly. Once confirmed, his serious face instantly morphs into a look of absolute, psychotic excitement. Learning that his guest is an operative from the top-tier Philippine assassination squad, Lee Sun decided he absolutely had to greet him in person. Back in the luxury vehicle, Kangmin sits frozen in absolute shock as the young man reveals his true identity. His chest tightens as his heart beats like crazy, realizing he is sitting inches away from his ultimate target. Realizing he's face-to-face with an incredibly dangerous individual, he immediately tenses up and prepares to draw his weapon. Leaning in with a smug grin, Lee Sin mockingly asks Kangmin if he's planning to execute him right then and there. Chuckle. Lee Sin points out the obvious, reminding him that he'd never walk into a meeting with a lethal killer without having some backup ready. When he gestures toward the window, Kangmin looks out only to find the entire area blocked off by heavily armored SUVs. Lee Sin advises him to keep his cool and avoid making any reckless moves. To throw Kangmin completely off guard, Lee Sin addresses him by his code name, Spade A, while pulling back his jacket to reveal a matching spade symbol. Stunned by the revelation, Kangmin can barely manage a startled reaction. While Kangmin silently realizes he's in deep trouble, the scene shifts to a meeting between his primary dealer and Heart 3, another dealer associated with the Batala Syndicate. It turns out Heart 3 was the one who set up Kangmin's cover identity for this assignment, customized exactly to the main dealer's specifications. Still, Heart 3 can't help but ask her colleague if she's absolutely certain about this risky move. She points out that she was taught by the main dealer herself to always make sure a cover identity is completely airtight. Knowing this, she questions why flaws were intentionally left in his background, wondering if this is a setup to get Kang Min killed. The blonde dealer dismisses the idea, shaking her head. She explains that leaving those breadcrumbs was necessary so the enemy syndicate would find him quickly, fast-tracking his infiltration. On top of that, she reveals that this high-stakes strategy was actually Kang Min's own idea. Hearing this, Heart 3 smirks, realizing that Kang Min purposefully put a target on his back just to draw the enemy out. She is glad to see his plan unfolding just as intended. Even so, she wonders about his chances of survival, since the network isn't going to just stand by and let an intruder operate freely. She's convinced that they will either rip him to shreds or execute him in the most brutal fashion imaginable. Unfazed, the main dealer calmly scoops some sugar into her tea and asks Heart 3 if she knows the most effective way to mislead someone. While Heart 3 suggests using a honey trap, the dealer corrects her, stating that the ultimate deception is wrapping a few lies inside absolute truth. It's a straightforward concept. Take a story that is completely true and sprinkle in just a tiny spoonful of falsehood. Meanwhile, inside the Rolls-Royce, Lee Sin reveals to Kang Min that he knows exactly why he slipped into Korea using an alias. Testing his theory, he asks if Kang Min is currently running for his life from the Batala Syndicate. He points out that actively provoking them like this seems incredibly reckless. Breaking his silence, Kang Min casually admits that someone recently did something to thoroughly annoy him. Intrigued by this vague answer, Lee Sin presses him to share the details. Noticing his intense curiosity, Kang Min secretly celebrates because everything is playing out exactly as planned. Now, all he has to do is execute the classic tactic, blend a tiny lie into a massive truth. His strategy is to take his actual life events and twist them into a completely different narrative. Starting his tale, Kang Min explains that his final assignment before retirement was to assassinate a high-profile congressman. He was promised full retirement afterward, and he looked forward to returning to Korea to live a peaceful, free life. Instead, an operative from his own syndicate was waiting for him in Korea to silence him, referring to the first assassin he took out at the convenience store. Kang Min points out that Batala had planned to eliminate him all along, rather than letting him walk away. Hearing this, Lee Sin notes that if he's actively running for his life, he should have stayed low and invisible. He questions why he's drawing so much attention to himself and painting a massive target on his chest. As he speaks, Lee Sin opens the vehicle's mini-fridge, exposing a cup of pudding. Kang Min counters by saying he doesn't operate like that, emphasizing that they are not cut from the same cloth. He then shares a clever proverb. If you want to hide a dog, you put it in a dog cafe. Since Batala will hunt him down eventually anyway, he decided he needed a powerful shield to protect himself from them. Grabbing the pudding, he offers it to Lee Sin and proposes a deal. Ensure his safety, and he will pledge his skills to the network. Taking the cup, Lee Sin asks if he isn't expecting a bit too much from a syndicate made up entirely of high school kids. Leaning in with an intimidating glare, Kang Min snaps back, asking if he was mistaken about the network being a lethal group of professional assassins. Cut back to the cafe, where the blonde dealer explains to Heart 3 that those teenage members are merely a convenient distraction. They act as disposable shields to mask the syndicate's actual executions. Heart 3 wonders if Kang Min's potential demise would also just be quietly covered up, but the dealer assures her that won't be possible. Surprised by her absolute certainty, Heart 3 asks what makes her so confident. Sighing, the dealer replies that it's simple. After all, they are talking about the legendary Spade A. Back in the car, Lee Sin admits that the proposition is tempting, but decides to reject it. Dismissing his words as sweet talk, he points out that Kang Min's story could easily be a carefully crafted blend of truth and lies. He suspects that Kang Min might be approaching them like a Trojan horse, harboring hidden, dangerous intentions. Before Lee Sin can finish, Kang Min interrupts, mocking him for being terrified of starting a war with Batala if he decides to harbor him. He taunts him, noting that his fear is obvious since he had to bring an entire army of bodyguards just to meet a single man. Kang Min keeps pushing his buttons until an enraged Lee Sin grabs him, snapping that the network would easily crush Batala in an all-out war. Shortly after, they pull up to a desolate, abandoned amusement park, prompting Kang Min to make a nostalgic comment about how long it's been since he visited one. Looking at the decaying rides, he dryly asks if they've stepped into a Halloween horror attraction. Lee Sin explains that the park has been shut down for years, meaning there are zero crowds and absolutely no security cameras. Declaring it the perfect graveyard to dump a corpse, he pops open the trunk to reveal a black body bag resting inside. He admits that his original plan was to slaughter Kang Min and throw him in alongside the other victim. However, he's decided to offer him a temporary reprieve. Unzipping the bag, he mentions that one detail in Kang Min's background check had been deeply confusing. He couldn't understand how Ha-yeon walked away from that chaotic shootout completely unscathed, questioning why Kang Min went out of his way to shield her. He wonders if it was just an effort to keep innocent bystanders out of the crossfire or simply to keep things quiet. Since Kang Min supposedly wanted to attract attention to himself, his protective actions toward her made zero sense. He pulls open the zipper completely to reveal a severely beaten Ha-Yan trapped inside. Her mouth is taped shut, and she is tightly wrapped in heavy, thick chains. Mocking him, Lee Sin asks if he saved her because he's secretly fallen for the girl. Seeing her tied up shocks Kang Min, and he demands to know what kind of game Lee Sin is playing. Lee Sin responds that he needs absolute proof of his combat talent and verification that he is indeed the legendary Spade A. Tossing him his signature spoon, Lee Sin commands him to prove his worth. And without a moment's hesitation, Kang Min aims the utensil straight at Ha-Yan. Meanwhile, back at a local cafe, Ha-Yan's oblivious friends are busy ordering a massive, Eiffel Tower-sized parfait. They are slightly worried about her sudden disappearance, noting that all their calls to her phone are going straight to voicemail. Meanwhile, at the park, Kang Min finds himself caught in a massive dilemma. His ultimate target, Lee Sin, is standing right in his crosshairs. Taking him out now would end the entire mission. However, the catch is that he cannot confirm if this man is the genuine leader or just a decoy. He suspects this might be a puppet placed there solely to test his reactions. It's a massive gamble. If he strikes and kills a double, the real mastermind will catch on and vanish into the shadows forever. Realizing he can't afford to be reckless, his only viable option is to play along with this self-proclaimed leader for now. Without warning, Kang Min drives the spoon straight into Ha-Yan, catching Lee Sin off guard. Predictably, the victim's body dissolves, revealing itself to be a high-tech dummy. Noticing how unfazed Kang Min is, Lee Sin asks when exactly he realized the captive was an imitation. Kang Min calmly replies that he knew the truth from the very first second. He points out that while the facial disguise was well done, you cannot replicate a person's exact bone structure or muscle definition. Just as Kang Min begins to question the purpose of this charade, Lee Sin's voice suddenly echoes over the park's public address speakers. Looking around, Kang Min realizes the man he was talking to has vanished, and the real Lee Sin is safe inside the control booth. Speaking through the microphone, Lee Sin complains that he went to great lengths to scare him, but Kang Min's reaction was disappointingly boring. He confesses that the dummy was indeed a fake disguised as his high school classmate. However, he adds that the person operating the decoy is actually an elite operative of the network. Before Kang Min can react, the figure from the trunk lunges behind him as Lee Sin explains that this man is a fellow professional hitman. Specifically, he is a disgraced former operative, making him a certified traitor to the organization. The assassin rips off the realistic latex mask to reveal his actual face underneath. He is a blonde-haired, green-eyed fighter named Lee Daniel. Feeling the rising tension, Kang Min questions Lee Sin about the real purpose behind this setup. Praising his sharp instinct, Lee Sin points out their shared predicament. Both Kang Min and Daniel are outcasts being hunted by their former syndicates. Because of their matching status, Lee Sin announces that he has organized a special survival duel for them. He explains it as a brutal death match where the sole survivor earns a permanent, protected spot in the network. The moment Lee Sin signals the start of the fight, Daniel immediately initiates a lethal strike. He whips his massive chains directly at Kang Min, who barely manages to dodge the oncoming impact. The sheer destructive power of the blow is terrifying, slicing the luxury Rolls-Royce clean down the middle. Wearing a sadistic grin, Daniel boasts that he is a true artist who takes immense pride in his craft. Kang Min recovers his footing, landing safely just a short distance from the impact zone. As Kang Min demands clarification, Daniel charges at him once more, explaining that his art involves executing people and turning their bodies into sculptures. He unleashes another massive sweep with his chains, but Kang Min effortlessly evades the destructive swing once again. Daniel continues to describe his gruesome process, recalling the sick joy he felt while designing his previous victim. Licking his lips in twisted satisfaction, he boasts about using the victim's family members as decorative elements around the display. Hearing this, Kang Min realizes that Daniel is a sick psychopath who desecrates the bodies of his innocent victims. Grabbing a heavy gear wheel from the rundown park machinery, Kang Min charges straight at Daniel. He decides that Daniel isn't just an ordinary lunatic. He's a dangerously creative psycho. He whips the chain directly at Daniel's throat, triggering Daniel's survival instincts to ring alarm bells. Though the chain seems destined to snap his neck, Daniel manages to tilt his head back at the absolute last microsecond to avoid a lethal blow. Although momentarily pinned down, he keeps his cool and grins, telling Kang Min that he actually takes the artistic psycho label as a major compliment. Flexing his muscles, Daniel shatters the binding chains with ease, turning back to face Kang Min with an eerie smile. Locking eyes with his opponent, he unleashes another strike while detailing exactly what he plans to do to his corpse. His attacks tear up the pavement and force Kang Min to back away as Daniel brags about how he'll sculpt Kang Min's joints and facial features before his body turns cold. He outlines his sick grand finale, bleaching the skin in hydrogen peroxide to capture a withered aesthetic before impaling the final piece on a high metal spike as a symbol of lost liberty. Listening to this bizarre pitch, Kang Min dryly summarizes that he wants to turn him into a merry-go-round horse, which infuriates Daniel, who snaps at him not to insult his art. Advancing smoothly, He swings his chains in wide, sweeping arcs to cut off any escape route, warning Kangmin never to equate his creations to cheap, commercial garbage. The chains rocket forward, shattering what's left of the carousel. Confident that his rage-fueled attack has vaporized his target, Daniel smiles, until Kangmin's calm voice echoes from the dust cloud, questioning his bias against synthetic materials. Out of nowhere, a heavy carousel horsehead is launched directly at Daniel, who cleanly slices it in half with his chain. Stepping through the debris, Kangmin notes that real masters don't blame their medium, just as Daniel looks up to find a hail of heavy metal rods raining down on him. He jumps back to evade the falling metal, laughing at Kangmin for resorting to such a clumsy and unrefined attack. But his amusement turns to dread as he realizes the poles weren't meant to hit him directly. They've pinned down his chains, locking him in place. Grinning, Kangmin asks how he likes his own installation art, pointing out that he's essentially crafted a magic circle using parts of a broken carousel horse. Daniel tries to wrench himself free, but the rods are driven too deep. Seeing him struggle, Kangmin cheerfully tells him to get ready for the grand finale. High above them, one of the heavy passenger cabins of the giant Ferris wheel detaches and plummets straight down. Daniel looks up in absolute panic as the massive block of iron falls right toward his head. The impact is colossal, triggering an explosion of dirt and debris that blankets the entire area. Amazingly, when the air clears, Daniel is still standing, having escaped with nothing but a minor cut on his forehead. He mocks Kangmin's attack for lacking any artistic elegance, but his rant is cut short when a small toy dog rolls up beside his foot. As Daniel stares at the toy in confusion, Kangmin emerges from the nearby souvenir store, sporting a plastic toy crown and carrying another odd gadget. He nonchalantly explains that he missed Daniel's speech because he was too busy searching for the right equipment. He proudly presents his find, a bright pink plastic toy wand, leaving Daniel completely speechless. Clicking the switch on the wand, Kangmin deadpans that this magical device possesses the ultimate power to purge all wickedness. Daniel bursts out laughing, mocking him for trying to use such a childish prop in a serious fight. He asks if he actually expects that plastic toy to work as a weapon, but Kangmin simply repeats his earlier philosophy. A true master never complains about his gear. Rejecting the idea, Daniel rips a piece of fabric from his shirt, arguing that top-tier professionals are always extremely particular about their equipment. Kangmin watches in disbelief as Daniel begins unraveling the fabric to weave a deadly, razor-sharp thread from the shirt fibers. Horrified by this bizarre display, Kangmin covers his eyes, yelling at him for showing off his techniques in such a creepy manner. Daniel lets Kangmin know that this thread is far from normal, explaining that it behaves as smoothly as a paintbrush but cuts with razor-sharp precision. Realizing the dangerous thread is rapidly closing in, Kangmin ducks his head just in time to avoid the lethal swipe as Daniel releases it. In a shocking display of power, the thread cleanly slices a heavy statue right behind Kangmin, making him instantly realize that he can't afford to take this weapon lightly. Suddenly, Daniel lunges forward, aiming to take off Kangmin's head with the wire, but Kangmin counters by triggering his toy to fire a barrage of bubbles. The sudden burst of bubbles hits Daniel right in the eyes, leaving him completely blinded and thrown off. Meanwhile, the toy's automated voice cheekily declares that it was designed to cleanse the wicked demon clan with its sacred bubbles. Clutching his stinging eyes, Daniel curses Kangmin for messing up his flawless complexion with such low-grade chemicals. Once he can finally see again, Kangmin is nowhere to be found, leaving Daniel looking around in total confusion. Muttering to himself like a crazy person, he wonders out loud if his opponent actually turned tail and fled. From the shadows, Kangmin had been carefully dissecting his opponent's moves, concluding that Daniel's armed combat is incredibly formidable. With his ability to deliver heavy chain strikes and execute razor-thin thread slices, Daniel is a master tactician balancing two completely different fighting styles. On the flip side, his situational awareness and tracking skills are practically non-existent. Having gathered all the information he needs, Kangmin decides it's time to wrap things up. When Kangmin scans the area, he notices Daniel is gone, leaving behind a cheap decoy of two hideous teddy bears tied up in thread. While he stares at the strange trap in confusion, Daniel suddenly materializes right behind him. Sensing the imminent danger, Kangmin's reflexes kick in instantly. Though he successfully shields his skull, he takes a nasty slash to his cheek and drops his pink toy. Daniel keeps up the arrogant banter, declaring that the playtime is over and it's time for him to die. But right in the middle of his speech, a quiet voice whispers right next to his ear. To his horror, he realizes Kangmin has driven the toy wand straight into his neck. As Daniel yanks the wand out, blood spurts violently from the wound, leaving him in absolute agony. Hearing his painful shrieks, Kangmin mocks him, asking how he still has the energy to lecture about art when he's literally bleeding out. Desperate, Daniel clutches his bleeding throat and flees inside the arcade. Kangmin casually strolls after him, easily tracking his path by following the crimson trail on the floor. Stepping into the dark building, he teases Daniel for scurrying away like a frightened alley cat just to save his own skin. He spots Daniel on his knees, having desperately wrapped the thread tightly around his throat to slow the bleeding. Daniel starts rambling incoherently about massive iron frameworks, leaving Kangman totally baffled. Scanning the room, Kangman realizes the floor is carpeted in razor wire and demands to know what nonsense he's talking about. He dryly jokes that Daniel chose a weird time to switch careers from a pretentious artist to a dying philosopher. But Daniel simply smiles, correcting him by calling this moment his ultimate artistic breakthrough. He admits that staring death right in the face has finally shown him his true purpose. Rather than waiting around to be taken, he has decided to drag death down on his own terms. Unbeknownst to Kangman, the lethal threads are actually tied to the massive iron structure hovering directly over the building. Still clueless, Kangman shrugs it off, thinking Daniel is just hallucinating from extreme blood loss. Then, the horrifying truth dawns on Kangman. He is standing dead center in a web of threads that Daniel had set up. With manic glee, Daniel declares that there's no escape, forcing himself up on shaky legs to tell Kangman that he will be his ultimate masterpiece. Daniel is on the absolute brink of collapse, bodily fluids leaking from his face as his organs begin to shut down. He asks if Kangman can hear the groaning of the rusted iron roof, weakened by years of weather, now losing its balance because of a few thin strings. In reality, Daniel is actively pulling the massive ceiling down on top of both of them. Finding his limbs completely trapped, Kangman panics, while Daniel smiles, calling their mutual destruction beautiful. As Kangman struggles, Daniel lunges forward to hold him in a tight embrace, naming his final work, Embracing Death. With Daniel refusing to let go, the heavy iron beams collapse inward, burying them both under tons of rubble. Sometime later, Lee Sin stands before the wreckage, marveling at how a massive building was instantly flattened. He's stunned that Daniel opted for suicide in a survival test, but as he turns around, we see Kangman standing right there beside him. Kangman is completely unharmed, looking annoyed only because he can't get his cigarette to light. Kangman points out that he fulfilled his end of the bargain, which Lee Sin gladly acknowledges. As it turns out, Kangman had tied Daniel up tightly in his own wires like a wrapped package before escaping. Applauding his success, Lee Sin confirms he passed the test flawlessly and promises that the network will keep him safe from now on. Before Lee Sin can lay out their terms, Kangman cuts him off, telling him he'll eliminate whoever they put in front of him, so there is no need to over-explain. A few days later, Kangman walks home from school, questioning why the network hasn't contacted him yet, despite bringing him into the fold. But as soon as he types in his door passcode, he freezes, instantly realizing that an intruder has entered his home.